All right, so I think a few more people will probably be rolling in as we get started, but we'll accept them from the waiting room. Uh, but want to keep us on time today. So aloha, everybody, and welcome to the Hawaii Group Gap informational webinar. My name is Francesca Scola, or you can call me Chess, and I'm the Food Safety Director at North Shore EVP's Hawaii Group Gap program. I also have my co-presenter here, Ingrid, who's one of our food safety specialists. And we're super excited today to introduce you to the Hawaii Group GAP program and what USDA certification can mean for your farm or food hub. Before we jump in, I just have a few housekeeping reminders to go over. But while I do that, feel free to take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, your farm or organization name, and where you're tuning in from. In terms of housekeeping, please keep yourself on mute during the presentation to avoid any background noise. You may unmute yourself at the end of the presentation. We'll have time reserved for Q&A. You can also feel free to throw in any questions to the chat during the presentation if you're worried you might forget it. Our team member, Mia, will be keeping track of those questions as we go so we don't miss anything. And lastly, we'll be recording today's presentation, and that will be sent to everybody registered for today's webinar, along with the slide deck. We'll also be posting the recording to our YouTube page. So to get started, I'm going to go through a brief agenda of what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to look generally at what USDA GAP is and then what Group GAP is. We're also going to look at what Group GAP certification looks like for food hubs and aggregators because it's a bit different than production farms. Then we'll look at how Group GAP is different from independent certification. And we'll look at food safety stats, perceptions, and solutions in the state of Hawaii. Then we'll transition into looking more closely into our Hawaii Group GAP program. We'll discuss the benefits of Hawaii Group GAP and what we offer our member farms. And lastly, we'll look through what the selection process for our program is and next steps you can take if you're interested in applying to the program. And then, of course, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So to start off, I want to make sure that everybody has a good common understanding of what USDA GAP is. So I'm sure pretty much everyone on this call has heard the term GAP or USDA GAP thrown around, and GAP simply stands for Good Agricultural Practices. And USDA GAP is an overarching set of certifications managed by the United States Department of Agriculture. Important thing to note here is that all of these audits are meant to cover fruit and vegetable producers. So they do not cover things like meat, eggs, cheese, other dairy products. We still do work with operations that produce those products, but the certification doesn't actually cover that. We look more here at cross-contamination control and allergens. But when we talk about GAP, it's really just the beginning of the rabbit hole. And before we enter any deeper, I want to make it clear that for all of these USDA GAP audit services, these are voluntary, non-regulatory, and market-driven audits. So think large chain grocery stores, institutional purchasers and distributors. They want to know that your food safety practices hold up before shelving or serving your product to customers. USDA GAP provides third-party verification that your operation is following those industry-recognized and scientifically backed food safety practices, as well as regulations and recommendations from the Food and Drug Administration. So you can think of USDA GAP audit services as an umbrella term, and there's many specific audit programs that fall under this umbrella. There are ones you've probably already are familiar with, like GAP and GIP, GroupGAP, Harmonized GAP, Harmonized GAP Plus. But there's also many other audit schemes that fall under this umbrella of USDA GAP. So there's commodity and geographic specific audits, like Mushroom GAP, California and Arizona LIGMA, or Leafy Greens Marketing Association, and California CBA, which is California Advisory Board. So any operation interested in certification will choose which audit scope fits their operation based on geographic location. So if you're a leafy green grower in Arizona or California, LIGMA might be the right fit. Or if there's a specific crop you grow that you're looking for a certification in, like mushrooms or cantaloupe. But keep in mind that across the board for these certifications, they're really meant to be for market access, and buyer request is the driver. So now moving into GroupGAP, and getting now looking into GroupGAP more specifically. Historically, GAP certification has been out of reach for many small and mid-sized producers and operations, whether that's because they're in remote locations, beginning farmers, or other groups of socially disadvantaged operations. USDA GroupGAP provides an alternative way for these farmers to achieve certification. And the basic concept is that the producer group develops and implements a shared quality management system, or QMS, that incorporates the requirements of the USDA audit standard that they agree upon, and the group agrees to be audited as one body. This group is then required to perform internal audits of all their members to ensure compliance with the audit standard and with the group's quality management system. In addition to that, the USDA also performs annual audits on the group's quality management system and annual audits on a representative sample size of the group's members. So GroupGAP is an attractive method of certification for smaller and mid-sized farms for a few reasons, including that the group can fully leverage existing resources and spread the cost of certification. Buyers also recognize the advantage of this multi-tiered verification that's part of the GroupGAP certification. So not only are member farms receiving their audits, but the group as a whole is also being audited by the USDA on an annual basis. And lastly, the group's quality management system really helps the group as a whole achieve consistent results and improve their system and processes. Now that we have a general understanding of GroupGAP as a whole, I'm going to talk about the Hawaii GroupGAP program specifically. So going back to that larger umbrella of audit types that we have, the Hawaii GroupGAP program works with operations in achieving Harmonized GAP and Harmonized GAP Plus certification. And there's a few reasons why we selected these particular audit schemes. First is they're both recognized by a large range of buyers. Next is, one size does not fit all. We have a super wide range of operations throughout our state. Some are growing indoor, some are aquaponics, hydroponics, some are not producing or growing at all. They're just aggregating. So the Harmonized GAP and Harmonized GAP Plus standards have different sections or scopes of the audits that fit for different types of operations and different types of buyer requests. Next is that they align with the federally regulated Food Safety Modernizations Act Produce Safety Rule, or FSMA. So the harmonized at the beginning of harmonized GAP and GAP Plus is meant to represent that they're in harmony and aligned with FSMA regulation. And then lastly, Harmonized GAP Plus is a global food safety initiative, or GSFI, benchmark certification. And this is a certification that's required by many larger national chain buyers like Target and Walmart. So the Harmonized GAP Plus certification allows growers to access those larger national chains. I'm going to talk a bit about food hubs because, as I said, the path to certification is different from production farms. So all USDA Harmonized GAP and Harmonized GAP Plus certified operations, including food hubs, need to meet several non-negotiable requirements. So this includes a written food safety plan, routine and documented employee training, and access to basic hand washing and restroom facilities. But for food hubs, the focus is on the post-harvest scope of the audit. So this scope looks closely at produce sourcing and supplier farm requirements. Essentially, the aggregator or food hub has a responsibility to take affirmative steps to ensure that all fresh produce that they're packing and storing in their facility has been grown and handled according to best practices, specifically the requirements that have been outlined in the field operations and harvesting portions of the Harmonized GAP standard. So this means food hubs aggregators are required to determine the compliance procedures for their supplier farms, clearly communicate what those expectations are to their supplier farms, and have a plan for how they're going to monitor these requirements. So when assessing a supplier farm of a food hub, there are a few key things that we want to keep in mind. First is restroom access. Does your supplier farm have adequate restrooms? And do these restrooms have hand washing stations with clean water and soap? Next is labor. Does your supplier farm have employees? And are these employees properly trained on basic food safety? And are they treated fairly? Next, harvest practices. How is the crop that you're sourcing being harvested by the supplier farm? Are they aware and monitoring possible contamination in the field before they harvest? Next, super important one, water quality, specifically post-harvest water quality. So whether that's for rinsing produce, washing hands of workers, or cleaning and sanitizing harvest tools, harvest equipment, it's really important that this water meets drinking water quality standards. Next, chemical use. So is your supplier farm using any chemicals? And if so, are they using them appropriately? Has the operator received necessary pesticide worker handler training? And lastly, for these key records is delivery. So how are products delivered to your food hub? Are supplier farms making drop-offs? Is your hub making pickups at these supplier farms? And what is the condition of the delivery vehicle and packaging when the product arrives to you? So these are just some of the supplier farm records to give you a little taste. But these records can vary depending on both the food hub and the supplier farm. But these are really the foundational pieces of information that a hub should know about the farm they're sourcing from. These elements help ensure that everything entering your facility meets food safety standards required under USDA harmonized GAP. So now that we've covered the core of USDA Group GAP, I'm going to pass it over to Ingrid to discuss the Group GAP model and how it differs from independent certification and look more closely at how we structure the Hawaii Group GAP program.
Alrighty, thanks, Chess. So here's a snapshot of the major differences between obtaining certification through a group versus independently. Members in a group pay one flat yearly fee that includes all the costs related to certification. So this includes technical assistance, trainings, corrective actions, all necessary documentation, such as farm plans, risk assessments, record keeping systems, maintaining audit scheduling, ensuring operations are meeting compliance and coordinating audits with USDA as well as internally. This could certainly be done independently, but may end up being a bit more costly. So it's good for producers to know that if you complete this process independently, you reach out and pay the USDA directly. Currently, their price is $171 dollars per hour, and an audit can take anywhere from 2 to 5 hours. And the producer also must cover costs related to the auditor's travel. So that includes flights, car rentals, hotel accommodations, any type of stay. So here are some perceived barriers to obtaining food safety certification. Some say cost is too high, it's too much work, it's too much record keeping. Small farms don't cause food safety outbreaks. They don't know how to do it, or it's just not needed, or maybe they just don't know where to start. So, some ways to overcome these barriers. In Group GAP, members pay one flat annual fee to keep overall costs relatively low for producers, and we'll discuss what that includes in a few minutes. We provide local assistance on and off the farm to support you throughout the process, as well as the right technology to streamline processes and record keeping, which will literally take you a couple minutes a day. This helps tremendously with the workload. Our team here at North Shore EVP is your farm food safety team. So each farm will work closely with one lead from our team throughout the certification process and beyond. And food safety certification is market driven. And if you have a buyer that is requesting it, then this is a good option. It can provide greater market access. And it's just insurance or proof that your farm is following best practices. All right, so here's our program at a glance. The annual fee is $1,000 a year, and this will include one-on-one support from North Shore EVP staff members. This person will assist you more closely with actually writing the farm food safety plan, conducting the risk assessment, maintaining ag chemical inventories, and any other documentation that may be needed for your specific operation. We support you through the entire process and beyond certification. Please know that audits must be completed every year. So it is not a one-time thing or you pass your audit one time and you're done. It does have to be, your audits do have to be annually. So we will maintain your audit schedule and ensure nothing expires and everything gets done when it needs to get done. We provide the necessary food safety training, and this also includes WPS training if your operation needs it. Members will receive a free account to Heavy Connect. This is a digital record keeping system. It makes record keeping easy and efficient. We completely customize this app to better meet the needs of your specific operation. So by doing this, record keeping will literally take you less than a few minutes a day. We create drop-down menus and input all of your personal information. So it's literally just a few taps and you're done with that record. And this program is comparable to GroupGAP on the continent. And just know additional costs will vary depending on your specific operations. So, for example, if you need regular water testing or need to enhance your infrastructure, such as bringing on a restroom or hand washing, things like that. Okay, so here are some stats. There are currently 39 operations listed on the AMS site, Agriculture Marketing Service, as of November 6th. 18 of those operations are currently certified through Hawai'i GroupGAP, and 21 others are certified just throughout the state. And we are expecting 10 additional operations to be certified and officially listed on the USDA AMS website in early 2026. Thanks, Amanda. Um, okay, so here is a very general timeline of what the process could look like. A lot of the timing will depend on the farmer, communication, and how ready their farm is for certification. So after submitting an application, we will conduct a gap analysis. This is a in-person farm visit to learn more about your operation and just kind of gauge how quickly or easily certification will be for your operation. After being accepted, the first few months are spent attending our virtual group gap training, completing homework, and begin record keeping on Heavy Connect. Once training is complete, months 3 through 6 are spent continuing your farm plan or finishing it up and conducting a risk assessment. This is a virtual meeting to discuss possible risks and mitigation on your farm. This document is necessary to meet compliance under the Harmonized GAP standard. We will also be getting you ready for your first internal audit, making sure that all documentation is complete and record keeping looks good and consistent and makes sense for your operation. You will then have your first internal audit, and this will be completed by somebody on our team other than your farm lead who you've been working closely with. Um, and again, these internal audits will need to be completed annually to maintain certification. So we will take care of your audit schedule and make sure everything gets done in a timely manner. And then lastly, if you are chosen, you may receive an external audit from someone at the USDA. Okay, so what is the selection process? Who are we looking for? Operations that are seeking to expand their markets and motivated farmers. Operations that will show commitment through good communication. So something to note is someone must be on the farm physically, whether it's the farm owner or farm manager, that will be the person we are in contact with the most. Having a designated person is crucial to the success of certification. We're looking for fruit and vegetable producers and the right infrastructure. So, a properly working bathroom, hand washing sinks, or the willingness to get those things. So, if you don't currently have one, just the willingness to maybe contact a porta potty company or work something out to get a properly working restroom on the farm. And then I touched on this briefly, the gap analysis. Again, this is an in-person visit to your farm to kind of gauge where you're at, how closely is your farm already aligned with Harmonized GAP. We'll take a look at your infrastructure, your restroom, your water sources, organization, tool location, fertilizer, all the things. So just a good general farm tour. Okay, and some next steps. Applications can be found on our website, nsevp.org. We will have two training cohorts running in 2026. Cohort 1 will begin February 3rd, and the second one begins early in 2026. So once we receive your application, we'll get in touch with you to schedule that gap analysis, that first initial in-person visit. Please know that our materials are also translated in Mandarin and Thai, and our cohort size ranges anywhere from 5 to 7 farms, depending on staffing. So December 15th is when applications are due for this upcoming cohort that is beginning in February. And you will hear back from us by January 6th with acceptance into the program. And then on February 3rd, our virtual online training classes officially start. All right, any questions? I know that was a lot of information thrown at you guys. So if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat.
I see one question so far from Georgia. Um, Maui has a portable toilet shortage due in part to the wildfire recovery. Some brands of waterless composting toilets are permittable by the County of Maui. Is this toilet option acceptable for GAP? This is a critical question for many off-grid water catchment farmers. Uh, yes, composting toilets are acceptable for GAP. There are some maybe like additional information that we'd want to pull, so we'd be interested in what sort of system it is, exactly where that compost waste material ends up eventually. And yeah, we do have several farmers in our group who are off grid on rain catchment, and that's workable for certification. It just requires a little bit more investigation and water testing if they're using that for their post-harvest water. Any other questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat or unmute yourself. I'll also just throw this next slide up while we wait for any other questions. This is our full team. We're pretty small, but feel free to reach out to any of us. And down here is our website where you can find more information about the program as well as links to the application if you're interested. What about water catchment as an acceptable use for hand washing? Yes, rain catchment can be acceptable for hand washing, but it will need to be treated first, whether that's with chemical water sanitizer or with UV filtration or osmosis. And it does need to be tested regularly for E. coli. Another question, is the cohort mandatory to receive audit and certification? What if we believe we are compliant and ready to pass? Do we simply contact the USDA? Yeah, you do not need to go through the GroupGAP program or cohort to receive certification. If you believe you're already compliant or want to go through that process yourself, that is an option. You would want to make sure that you look at the USDA standard closely to make sure that you're hitting all the kind of little details. There's lots of record keeping requirements that the standard asks for that can get a little bit finicky. So even if you're keeping a pesticide record and a harvest record, there might be certain parts of the standard that you're missing in those records. So if you are to do it yourself, I would recommend downloading the standard and maybe doing a self audit you're on your own before reaching out to the USDA. Some more question, how often is water testing required? It depends on your water source. So if you're on municipal water, no water testing required. We just pull your Board of Water Supply report for the year. If you are on surface water, if that water is used for post-harvest stuff, it needs to be treated and it needs to show 0 E. coli, and that is a quarterly water test for any open systems, so surface water or open well systems, and rain catchment if it's exposed to the elements. And then if you're on a closed well system, it's annually. Does North Shore EVP provide water test kits? Not currently, but we are working on it. One of the non-mandatory requirements of the standard is that whichever lab you go to do your water testing, they need to be GLP certified or good laboratory practice certified, and they need to have a validated scientific method. That's a non-mandatory requirement, so you can still go to a non-certified lab to get your test. We're just working on sourcing the proper media to do those tests ourselves. But we would they wouldn't be test kits sent out to people. We would do the sampling. Again, in the chat, the cost of our cohort, it's $1,000 a year. What are the guidelines about wastewater for wash pack? Maui County is working on permitting gray water to irrigation systems. Will this be a problem for GAP? No, gray water, reused water, surface water, all that can be used as irrigation. For water in general, the standard is looking at it from a risk assessment perspective. So it's a little bit tricky to say. There's no hard yes or no. It's about doing a risk assessment of your particular operation, being knowledgeable about where the potential contaminants could enter your water, and then having a written plan and procedure in place for what to do if contamination was to happen. But for gray water and irrigation systems, I think I would say that the key here would be that it's drip irrigation and that it's not coming into contact with the edible portion of the crop. So we wouldn't want gray water overhead irrigation on leafy greens. But if it's a drip to some fruit tree orchards, that's a much lower risk. Can you provide some example of value-added products? Yeah, so harmonized GAP doesn't cover value-added products, but we do work with operations that might also produce value-added products. So it would be similar here to an aggregator. For value added, we'd look at cross-contamination and allergen control. But harmonized GAP is really focusing on the raw product. Any other questions? Oh, how many farmers are you working with on each island? Ooh, I can pull up those numbers. We work mostly, our biggest numbers are on Oahu, but we do have farmers on every island. We have, I think, about 6 farmers on Maui, 5 on Hawaii Island, 1 farmer on Molokai, and 1 farmer on Lanai, and probably about 5 on Kauai, but a majority are on Oahu. Do food hubs have to keep traceability records as part of GAP certification? Yes, all for food hubs and for farms looking for certification, traceability is a really important part. Unless your operation is doing direct to consumer. So if I'm a farmer and I'm exclusively delivering to a restaurant, direct to consumer, traceability documentation is not needed. If you're selling into a distribution center or if you are a distribution center, traceability is key. I know some people are hopping off, which is completely fine, but we'll stay on for a bit longer if there are any other questions. Okay. Would food hubs also have to keep records of their assessments and visits to farms? Um, that is not a hard and fast requirement, but it's something that we would definitely recommend, like an annual or biannual site visit to your supplier farms, um, checking off a few basic things to make sure that everything looks up to code, and keeping us busy with the questions. So I think that would it's not required, but it is a really great way of showing that you're doing your due diligence as a hub. We'll stay on for a few more minutes if there are any other questions. But if you have a question that comes to you later, feel free to um, reach out to us on email. We'd be happy to chat more. Are there annual training requirements beyond the first cohort participation and ongoing compliance, record keeping, and audits? Yes. The biggest chunk comes at the when you first join the program. That's when we have our more structured weekly or sometimes even twice a week Zoom training classes to give you a big picture overview of the standard. But the standard does sometimes change, which is what we keep track of. So when there are changes to the standard, we make sure to provide guidance and training to our member farmers on those updates. For ongoing compliance, record keeping is definitely the key. So having consistent records, basically to show the auditor that what you say you're doing is actually happening on the day to day. And audits are required annually. So internal audits from one member of our team would occur annually for folks in the program, and then the USDA selects a subset of the total members of the group and audits those farmers as well. So this for 2025, we had four of our Hawaii group members receive audits from the USDA.
I think also something to note is past that first year with all the bulk training and the following years, things are constantly changing on the farm. Like there's new employees or new processes or new amendments or things like that. So we kind of are keeping track of that, while we're in communication with the farmer and are constantly changing the Heavy Connect app, like adding in information or adding things that you're using or no longer using or tools, new machinery. I mean, whatever it is, whatever is changing and evolving on the farm, um, kind of rolls out and displays in your documentation and your record keeping and things like that. So after that first kind of heavier year, the following years is really spent on upkeep and making sure that everything stays up to date and current and accurate.
Any other questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat. Ingrid and I will stay on for a few more minutes if there are more questions. Thank you guys. Yeah, if you need to jump off now, also feel free. Um, Again, we'll be sending the recording and the slide deck to everybody registered, so you'll get that. And we'll also be uploading this recording to YouTube.